Good morning. I'm Debbie Krennick, publisher of Newsday. Earlier this week, Long Island entered phase 2 of the reopening process. Many businesses went back to work and started on the path of figuring out their new normal. Among them was the real estate industry. And though buying or selling your home under normal circumstances can cause a lot of stress, doing it as you navigate new health, safety, and legal concerns created by the coronavirus pandemic can bring things to a whole new level. Our guests this morning are here to help provide some clarity and answer your real estate questions. Angela Prince is a real estate broker and owner of Prince & Associates Realty. Caitlin Matroni is a licensed sales agent and vice president and board member of the Hamptons and Norfolk Realtors Association. Michael Ferrugia is a partner at Bruno, Gerbino, Soriano, and Aiken. And Ellen D'Agostino is also a real estate broker and co-owner, Lucky to Live Here Realty. Thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder that we're also streaming this live on Newsday.com. So if anytime you experience problems with this platform, head over to Newsday.com. Now I'm going to turn things over to Newsday's real estate writer, Maura McDermott, to get things started. Welcome, Maura.
Thank you, Debbie. And for our audience members, now would be a good time to start submitting your questions, and we'd be happy to ask our expert panelists to answer those. So Michael, I'm going to kick it off with you. Can you give us an overview of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and what's maybe not required but would be wise from a legal standpoint?
Sure. Good morning, Maura, and thank you for having me.
Good morning.
New York State has in fact published new guidelines to guide us through the phase 2 and the opening of the real estate market in phase 2. They're quite extensive. They can be found at forward.newyork.gov. If you're interested in reading guidelines, it's about 13 pages of very extensive guidelines. I'll just highlight a few, which really do pertain specifically to the consumer. Some of them are obvious, some of them are not so obvious. The obvious ones are face coverings. If you're going to engage in an in-person showing, obviously face coverings are mandatory. Same thing with social distancing requirements. Those are also mandatory. What might not be so obvious and also mandatory is that in-person showings can only be made with unoccupied or vacant properties. That means the sellers can't be there. Landlords can't be there during showings. So that may prove problematic to some potential sellers and landlords, but that is a mandatory requirement. Obviously, the overall intent of these guidelines is to minimize interpersonal contact to the greatest extent possible. So they want to do everything to do so. The other mandatory requirement, which does affect the consumer, is that only one party is permitted inside the showing at a time. The problem here is that the state didn't define yet what the term party means. So we don't know if party includes a husband and wife or a potential buyer and their home inspector. We're waiting for clarification from New York State with respect to that issue. However, one other point that needs to be made about these mandatory requirements is that they cannot be waived. These are not waivable, these mandatory requirements. Then the guidelines also go on to spell out some suggested best practices, which may not be mandatory, but certainly best practices. One, which I'm in favor of, is absolutely no children or ancillary parties attending the showings. So it used to be you could bring your whole family to show, to see the prospective homes or whatnot. That's no longer the case. Showings, because of the state of the pandemic, it's not a place for children or family members. So the state is discouraging that. They're also discouraging, obviously, traveling in the same cars as your real estate professionals. And guidelines also do strongly suggest the use of all the new technology platforms that we have in order to minimize interpersonal contact. So if you're doing a final walkthrough, that can be done via Zoom or FaceTime or something like that. It is encouraged, but not mandatory.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, as of course we all know, the process of selling a home has changed dramatically since March. Elena, can you offer some tips for homeowners who might be thinking about selling, about what they can do to market their homes effectively?
Sure. Good morning, Maura, and thank you for having me. Yeah, there are many, well, first of all, getting your house ready is very important. And because of, wanting to minimize contact, it's always good to have an agent come do a walkthrough of your home if you're considering selling. So, but this can be done virtually through a FaceTime tour. So this has been very effective in having the ability to give suggestions and advice to potential sellers in getting ready and going room by room and giving tips on what to do to get their house ready by decluttering, organizing. And, many times sellers also feel that they have to spend money on major renovations like kitchens and baths. So it's really important to have a professional that is a full-time agent that knows the market, knows the trends, to determine whether these improvements will add value to the home. Because typically it's not the expensive renovations that are going to add value. It's just creating a feeling in the home, a bright and airy, open, decluttered home is really what's most important. So really do recommend on the onset of considering to sell to have a professional real estate agent come in. Also, regarding tips for homeowners that are considering selling, taxes can always be a big objection. So it's really important to evaluate whether you have a possible case for a tax grievance. And because of the pandemic in Suffolk County, the deadline for filing a tax grievance has been extended to June 23rd. So you do have a window of opportunity here to evaluate whether you may have a case for a tax grievance. Regarding marketing strategies, it's critical when selling your home to mass market it. That is the goal. So it's very hard to attain that goal if you're for sale by owner, or if you're working with an agent that is not employing the latest virtual technology. So once again, a full-time real estate professional that has a successful track record and is utilizing themselves, these techniques, is critical. Virtual 3D tours have become paramount in having buyers get a feel for the house and doing an interactive walkthrough. So once again, that goes back to having your house picture perfect, because this is a more invasive way of showing the home, but it also is very effective in having buyers get a really good feel for the home without having to come in, which limits the number of people coming into your home. So you want to know that the agent that you're going to be hiring is doing 3D interactive tours. The other very important marketing technique, which has become really popular now since the pandemic, is the virtual Facebook Zoom open houses. These are really important in showcasing your home to the masses, much more effective than having a public open house. So this is done through Zoom, and it is also, you should make sure that it's being integrated to YouTube and on Instagram TV. So real estate agents are independent contractors. So you want to know specifically what your real estate agent is going to be doing for you. And more than ever, mass marketing across the internet, even on social media, Instagram, Facebook, these are all ways that people are looking at real estate. And this is just important to know how the agent is going to be using these techniques.
Thank you, Elena. It's really good to get a sense of how home selling has changed in the last few months. And of course, some of our viewers might be thinking about buying a home, but they're not sure how to do that, and especially how to do it safely. Angela, could you talk to us a little bit about how people who might be interested in buying can get a sense of what's out there, get a sense of what the market is like, and do it in a way that's safe?
Yes. Good morning, Maura. Thank you for having me. And thank you to anyone that's joining us live or maybe watch it. So the first thing I'm going to say is, for anyone that was pre-approved pre-corona, definitely recheck your numbers, call your mortgage professional and have them check them over, because things did change. There was a big shakeup and a lot of things changed in the mortgage industry as well. So if you were already done with that, I would go back to it. So now we're out and we're house shopping. What do I recommend doing? Allowing extra time, right? Going into the houses now, as Michael said, it's one at a time. Whether the one is you and your whole party or just you, you do need to allow extra time for if you're not the first one in or if someone's in there. I would definitely say to put extra gloves and extra face masks in your bag. The mask will be required. Gloves are not required, but I highly recommend it. You're walking into someone's home. So you definitely want to have them on so you can look inside closets if it's not open or whatever you need to do. You want to be courteous of others, and you just want to have an understanding. We're kind of all in this together. It's new for everyone. We're figuring it out as agents, as brokers, as buyers, as sellers. We're all figuring everything out. So you just want to have a little bit of an open mind and just be safe. You know, if you sit back and think about it for a little while, if someone was coming into your home, what would you want them to do? And maybe have that same exact practice. So that's going to be my advice to buyers. It's short, it's sweet, and I think it's really simple, but you know, just be safe and protect everyone.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah.
And Caitlin, my first question for you actually dovetails with a question that just came in from a viewer named Bill, who asks if we're expecting an exodus from the city to the suburbs. So Caitlin, what buyers are looking for in a home has changed dramatically in the last few months, and where buyers are coming from might also have changed. Can you talk a little bit about what buyers seem to be looking for these days and where buyers seem to be coming from?
Sure. Good morning, Maura, and everybody watching. Again, thank you for having me. To answer the first part of that question, buyers have been cooped up in their houses for 2+ months in Manhattan, maybe even longer. So you're really getting an opportunity to be in your home and realize what you're missing or what you want in your next home. And that's changing. So I'm finding that a lot of buyers, as they're starting to be able to work from home, they're wanting one office or maybe two if both parties are working from home. So that's changed drastically. I'm not usually looking for homes that have enough office space for 2 adults. And then sometimes even space for the children as well, if they're looking for, homeschooling them. Outdoor space has become really important as people are spending more time entertaining at home within their own family. So those are 2 big things that I'm finding homeowners are looking for. And then just overall, maybe more space. If they've been cooped up for a while in their home, they're looking for more space than they've previously had in their other home. The second part of the question, and to answer Bill's question, we are seeing an influx, or at least I am, of buyers coming from New York City and Western Long Island. Traditionally, you can get a bigger home and more bang for your buck, as Angela had mentioned the other day, in Suffolk County. And we are seeing a lot of buyers that are coming into Suffolk County, coming from Western Long Island, and they're looking for more space, they're looking for bigger yards, and everything that I mentioned before, probably the home office, the backyards, all those things that you can get here in Suffolk County, and you can get for a reasonable price compared to Manhattan and Western Long Island.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Another question that just came in from a viewer named Liz is, what are the most effective ways to promote a Zoom open house to get that mass audience? Now, this actually speaks to something that Elena and I had been speaking about the way that open houses have changed. Elena, can you talk to viewers about how open houses have changed and what you found to be most effective?
Well, we really do find that these Zoom open houses that are integrated with Facebook and streamed across YouTube and Instagram TV have drawn in hundreds, and then when we promote it, thousands of viewers. So it is highly effective. Also, the timing of when you do them, we take polls to see when most viewers are online. And we have found during the pandemic that 4 to 6 p.m. during the weekdays have been the best for these, the amount of views we're seeing on the open houses. People can comment, and it's just, we've had the seller on one end walking through the house with their phone, and I've been virtual at home and leading the tour, and talking about the home. And people can ask questions because we have it integrated with Facebook. They can ask questions on Facebook. So, and we can revisit rooms, and it's very interactive. And we have just found it to be so beneficial in drawing in potential buyers, much more effective than public open houses.
Thank you, Elena. Another question has come in from Cheryl. Angela, I'll ask you to take a look at this one. So Cheryl asks, so children can't be at showings, and there's no school or childcare, and it's not safe for grandparents to watch them. This is a non-starter, no? Can you talk a little bit about the kind of frustrations that people are facing? I know that you represent both buyers and sellers. Can you talk about the frustrations that buyers are feeling right now, and maybe if you found that any of them have come up with some creative solutions to some of the problems that they're facing?
Creative is the perfect word. Whether creative means if it's more than one person buying the house and maybe one person goes in first, then the other one goes in and they can leave the children in the car. Going back out there, sometimes I'll be doing it, but I did that pre-corona. You know, sometimes children were just sleeping, so the agent can get involved, especially since we can show again. It really is going to be a case-by-case basis. And as long as you have, to me, as long as you're working with a real estate professional, even if you're a single person buying a house and you have children, your real estate professional can absolutely help you out with that, 100%.
Thank you very much. Now we've gotten a few questions about this, and I'll ask Michael to take this one on. Ruth Ann asks, to clarify, homeowners cannot be there when the broker is showing? Can they be outside at a deck, or do they have to be totally off the property? And another viewer had asked, you know, in an expression of the same sort of frustration about the logistical challenges here, you know, there's no place to go these days. You know, it's not like you can just, you know, go see a movie for a few hours. Michael, can you talk about how sellers can navigate the difficulties involved in having to be off the property, but not really having any place to go?
It's certainly a challenge, and Angela hit it right on the head that, you know, we're all figuring this out. There's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of fear of a lot of things. There's fear of contracting the virus. There's fear of being sued over the virus. There's fear of exposing other people to the virus. So that fear plays out in many different ways. It is, however, a problem we're all dealing with. This is not certainly an ideal situation. You're correct, sellers might not have anywhere to go. Can they remain on the property? They're not supposed to be on the property at the same time. If they're outside and the buyers are inside, do you really want to risk it? I would suggest probably not. These are great conversations to have with your attorney. But the laws and the intent of the guidelines is to do exactly that, is to keep people apart. If you're trying to skate around that by, you know, waiting outside or whatever, you're at risk, and you're at risk for a lot of things. And I would suggest, especially in this state of fear, we want to minimize that risk as much as possible. So take a ride in your car for a half an hour. That's what I would suggest.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was helpful. And, you know, we have a question that came in from Rich, and I'm going to ask Caitlin to take this one on, please. So Rich says, we put in extensive work over the 35 years we've been here, and we know we'll probably not get all the investment back. But with the fact that we have almost everything new, where should we start pricing the house? On the lower end to get more traffic, or on the higher end of what we're looking for and then work down? Now that's, you know, Rich is asking a very specific question about his situation, but I'm sure that might be a question that a lot of viewers have. Caitlin, can you talk about that?
Sure. I think in general, every agent has different tactics that they use, and it really is catered to that individual client and how quickly they need to sell their home. So it never hurts to be the best in class. And that's what I always try. That's where I always try to price my properties. So compared to what's out there, the size of the home, the bedroom count, the bathroom count, and what homes in the same school district and same community, Rick's going to be up against, or any client's going to be up against. Be the best in class, be the best priced home in that category, and you'll attract buyers. Our goal is to attract as many buyers to that property as possible to generate showings and to generate activity, and then ultimately to generate multiple offers. So someone like Rick would be able to select them and, go back and collect best and finals. So pricing the home accurately, working with a local realtor who knows the other inventory that's out there, and then being the best in class, that's always my recommendation when we put a house on the market.
Thank you, Caitlin. Michael, I'm going to ask a question that might not be on viewers' minds right now, but maybe it should be. A lot of buying activity, selling activity, financial transactions are happening online right now. What kind of considerations should people keep in mind in terms of their financial safety?
That's a great question. I'll just preface my answer with that one of the good things that's coming out of this terrible situation we're going through is that it's forced our industry to evolve. And when I say evolve, I mean by adopting certain technologies and platforms that was not historically common practice in New York. We're now catching up. So contracts are being signed electronically. Down payments are being transferred electronically. Closing documents are being signed to a large extent electronically. And these are wonderful developments in the industry. But with these developments comes inherent risk. With everyone working from home and a lot more business being conducted electronically, it obviously opens the door to cybercrime. And I can tell you that cybercrime has spiked since the pandemic. The cyber criminals know that everybody's working from home, and it just takes one weak link. So in the real estate arena, the cyber criminals are quite savvy, and you know how many parties are involved. You have multiple buyers, you have multiple sellers, you have potentially multiple agents involved, you have lenders involved, title companies, several sets of attorneys. So in one transaction, there's a lot of people emailing information back and forth. It just takes one of those person's emails to be hacked. And those hackers the first thing that they will do once they see that there's emails going around about a pending transaction is nothing. They'll sit and monitor. And they'll monitor and monitor, and they'll wait until the eve of closing. And on the eve of closing, they'll send out a bogus email with bogus wiring instructions. In my retainer agreement, I insist, and I specifically go through this with every one of my clients, if you get an email directing you to wire money any place, do not wire any money anywhere unless it's confirmed verbally. Not confirmed via email, verbally. So wire fraud and cybercrime is on the uptick, and we need to prevent it. And there are other measures that professional offices can undertake to prevent that from happening. But because there are so many professionals involved in a single transaction, you can't control all of those offices. And like I said, it just takes one weak link in that chain for a cyber criminal to then email everyone involved bogus information.
Thank you, Michael. And at Newsday, we ran a story a few months ago about a woman in Nassau County who was buying a home all cash using her life savings. She lost the entire amount because of cybercrime. So that really resonates. Thank you. We have another question here from Aaron that I'm going to ask Angela to take a look at. So Aaron writes, first-time homebuyer here. Any advice on how to navigate the crazy rise in prices, bidding wars, etc.? Any unofficial predictions for what things will look like in the coming months regarding the buyer-seller balance? And, of course, we don't want to try to make too many predictions about what will happen in the months to come, since we're, only 2 days into phase 2, where the real estate market has essentially reopened. So I'm not going to ask you, Angela, to make any long-term predictions, but can you offer Aaron any advice in the short term for how to deal with the shortage of inventory for folks who are looking to buy a home?
Yes. So one, work with a real estate professional, right? We're going to have inside information a lot of times that you're not going to be able to see on a lot of the sites that's out there, right? So that's one. Number two, if you're in love with a home, put your offer in. Now is not the time. This market is not the market to kind of dilly-dally, so to speak, It's a really strong seller's market for the most part. So if you're in love with something, go for it. Put your best foot forward and hope you get it. You got to be aggressive in this one.
Thank you very much. We've gotten a few questions about how real estate closings are happening. So since we've got a number of questions about that, I'm going to ask Michael to talk about that. Are real estate closings still happening the way that they used to, with, half a dozen or more people in a room for hours?
Yeah, we're probably never going to go back to those days. And for me, that's okay. Most closings, majority of the work is being done either remotely and ahead of time. And we are doing a lot of escrow closings. So a seller might go into their attorney's office, pre-sign transfer documents, review all the financials remotely through a video conference such as this, and go to their attorney's office just to sign off on all the transfer documents, which are then sent out to be held in escrow pending receipt of funds. So again, our industry here in New York is migrating towards similar practices that you see down south, out west for escrow closings. That is surely becoming the norm since the pandemic, and it was not before. Many lenders as well, I touched on this before, many lenders are now migrating to online click and sign platforms for most of the loan documents. Now, that does not mean that you can't leave your house and purchase a home. You could with powers of attorney. There are ways to do it, but it is possible to have a completely hands-off closing. But there are certain documents that lenders do still need wet signed in person. But if all the preparatory work and all the adjustments and financial accounting is done ahead of time between the respective councils, including the lender's council, if that's all done ahead of time, the closings should not, the physical part of the closing should not be any longer than 5-10 minutes, as opposed to back in the day, you were sitting around a conference table for the better part of 2 hours with a whole room full of people, as you said, Maura. Those days are gone.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now, Caitlin, I'm going to ask you to answer 2 questions. One, we've gotten a few questions actually from viewers, including Judy, who would like to clarify whether, now that we're in phase 2, which of course started on Wednesday, are real estate agents and brokers allowed to accompany buyers into a home? So I'll ask you to answer that first. And then could you also answer a question from Peter, who asks, how do you qualify prospective buyers when having a Facebook or Zoom open house? So maybe for that question, maybe if you could speak more broadly about what kind of screenings and documents and other qualifications are being required these days before buyers actually physically walk into a house. There might not be a way to screen people before they join a Zoom or Facebook open house, although I could be mistaken about that. But so could you answer, first of all, whether agents are allowed to go into a house with prospective buyers, and what kind of screening buyers should expect before they physically walk into a house?
Sure. So the 2 questions sort of go hand in hand. So since phase 2, we are allowed to resume in-person showings following the CDC guidelines and the New York State guidelines that recently came out. As Angela had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of safety precautions, the wearing of the masks. Sometimes the agent may step in, view the property, step out, and allow the other party in, just to minimize how many people are in that house at the same time. We're also, since we're there, we have to make sure that we're not disposing of any PPE within the home. Everything's getting wiped down before we go in, after we leave the property. So we're taking safety precautions while we're out with the parties, but we are allowed to resume in-person showings if absolutely necessary. There's a virtual tour on that property. A lot of us are sending the virtual tour first to reduce the amount of showings that we're doing within that day. For the second part of the question, the screening that's happening, there are a lot of disclosures that New York State has always required. And in addition to those disclosures, there are COVID disclosures that are now going out. There are screening questions, as far as it's 3 screening questions. It has to do with the last 14 days. So if you've been in the presence of somebody who's tested positive, if you've tested positive within the last 14 days, or if you've had any symptoms within the last 14 days. And this is some screening that buyers can expect to see and sellers can ask to be done before they have people enter their home. As far as a Zoom or a Facebook open house, those are really open to everybody. Unless you're doing like a login where you have a specific web page or an app that you're using where you can have someone register for the event, there isn't any screening other than maybe if they're pre-qualified. But I think to encourage everybody coming to a live open house is good, because a lot of the buyers that are out there that maybe aren't ready, they haven't put their house on the market yet, they're going to be limited to the amount of homes that they can go out and see in person, because a lot of homeowners are requiring pre-approvals or having your house on the market prior to entering their home, just to minimize how much foot traffic's coming in. So when you're doing something on the internet like a Zoom or a Facebook or a virtual open house, I think it's great to open that up to everybody, have people out there see what the inventory is, interact with that agent if possible, and then just it's word of mouth. They can share that house with their friends, their family. So that, I think, for me anyways, I think that would be open to everybody.
Thank you, Caitlin. Elena, I'm going to pass a question to you from Bill. Bill asks, are pools attractive in view of staycations? So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what sort of amenities people are looking for these days in a home, what makes a home attractive, and maybe if there are some relatively affordable, relatively easy changes that people can make to their homes to make them more attractive these days.
Okay, well, regarding pools, I mean, we are seeing more people interested in like a staycation retreat. So pools are becoming something I think is more desirable, even beachfront, water view homes, that people are now spending more time in their homes. So they're looking at these as year-round retreats instead of a summer place. So but you know, there are plenty of people that are not interested in a pool. So it's really depends. I mean, we have buyers that absolutely don't want a pool, and some that do. I think more and more people do want pools. So that is dependent. I wouldn't say that it increases the value tremendously, because not everybody wants one. So, you know, people that have a pool think, well, I have a pool, my house should be worth more. That is not necessarily the case. So that is something that has to be evaluated with each home. And regarding a simple improvements, I mean, it's really about creating a feeling, a very decluttered, organized home, bright and airy, neutral paint colors, and taking down, I mean, these are all simple fixes, heavy, outdated window treatments, opening up, bringing the light in the house, and minimizing what's in the house. So less is definitely more, and you know, just simplifying. And also regards to these interactive 3D tours, I mean, you really do want to take down family photos and more personal items, because people can zoom in on these aspects of the room. So it's really all about decluttering, organizing. Major improvements to the home are typically not going to add value if you're selling in the near future, but that's on a case-to-case basis depending on the condition of those rooms. But it's more about creating a feeling. Curb appeal is very important. That is a simple fix too. Just people are at your front door before they come in and standing there. So to have that looking picture perfect is very important. You just want an overall feeling to be immediate, and also minor repairs. You want everything in working order, and all systems, all appliances, everything in working order. So people are very attracted to a clean and organized home.
Thank you very much, Elena. We have a question here from Jennifer, and I'm going to ask both Michael and Angela to answer this question. Jennifer asks, which agent is responsible for wiping everything down before and after the showing, the listing agent or the buyer's agent? So I'll ask Michael to answer that specific question. And Angela, I wonder if you could then speak about what buyers and sellers should be expecting from their real estate agents these days. Before COVID, I think it was common to expect that your agent, whether you're a buyer or a seller, is going to be hosting physical open houses where, the agent might sit for 2 hours in the house as people come in and out. What are agents and brokers doing these days for buyers and for sellers that buyers and sellers should expect these days that they might not have thought to ask about in the past when they're interviewing agents and brokers? So Michael, I'll turn to you first and ask who's responsible for wiping everything down?
Well, I'll certainly default to being that it's the listings agent's listing. I'll certainly default to they would be foolish not to. Now, if a selling agent or a cooperating agent is accompanying the buyer, well, remember, there's only one party allowed in the property at a time, right? The question is, does that definition of party include potential buyer and their selling agent or cooperating agent? We don't know yet. So it's quite possible that the cooperating agent may be required to stay outside during the showing. We don't know. These are all things that are going to be ironed out with further clarification from New York State, and then presumably years down the line through litigation as well. But I certainly would suggest if you are a listing agent, irrespective of whatever the selling agent is going to do, you're still responsible for sanitizing.
Thank you, Michael. And Angela, could you talk about what buyers and sellers should be expecting from their agents and brokers that maybe they might not have thought to expect before COVID?
Everything, of course. So advice and direction, that should have been expected before, but we really have to step up our game in terms of trying to keep everyone safe. As far as who is required to wipe it down, it does fall on the listings agent's lap, especially for in-person open houses. We are required to wipe down in between, which is one of the reasons I feel gloves are very, very important for the listing agent that may be doing an in-person showing or multiple showings or even an open house. As far as our buyers go, it's really just going to go back to letting our buyers or reminding our buyers to be courteous, to be safe, to wear your mask. We may have to keep some people calm if they feel like they don't want to do it, and just help them to understand how important it is, not only for themselves, but also for the home that you're entering, right? You don't know who's in there. It could be young children, it could be someone older. You don't know. So you just need to do your best for everyone. And I think the agents, brokers, real estate professionals, really just need to step up their game and speak to our buyers, speak to our sellers, and just remind.
Thank you very much. Elena, I'm going to ask you to answer a question from Emily, who asks, how do you find these virtual Zoom or Facebook open houses?
Well, you'll get a notification on Facebook if you're on that agency's page. You're going to get a notification about the open house. Also, it's via email. If you're signed up and registered with that company, you are going to get an email regarding the Facebook open house. we put all of ours, our schedule of, just like how we would advertise public open houses, we put out there a schedule of our virtual open houses. And also on MLS. MLS has now, we've been able to put on there also about virtual open houses. So just as there was a spot for public open houses, we can also advertise virtual open houses on MLS as well.
Thank you very much, Elena. And Caitlin, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say somebody has a house that, maybe needs a little bit of work. They're not in a position where they're willing or able to spend a lot of money to upgrade it right now. And they're concerned that maybe it might not show well online, and so much marketing is happening online right now. Could you talk about what a seller in that position might be able to do to put themselves in the best possible position to sell their home at a time when so much sales activity is happening online?
Sure. I have sellers that are faced with that problem all the time. Right now, there's very low inventory. So I would be less concerned about what needs to be updated in the home, because a lot of buyers are willing to take on those updates. Whether they see it online or they see it in person, it's going to be the same house. So take professional photography, work with an agent that's going to take professional photography. We have a lot of tools where we can edit those pictures and show buyers what that house would look like if it was painted another color, if it was staged. Digital staging is huge, where we virtually stage a house rather than bring furniture in. Staging can be a costly expense, but when we do it digitally, we can save the client a lot of money and show the house with different furniture, or there's a lot of things that we can do to continue to market that home. And buyers are very open. I think with watching HGTV and all these fixer-upper programs out there, they understand. And I would rather them see the house online before they come to it, and then they're disappointed. So marketing the home online is going to be the same way we would market it if you were to come to it, except we can do some things to maybe entice other buyers to see the opportunity that's in that home if they were to make those upgrades for themselves.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of our time. I'm going to ask Michael to answer one last question that has come in from a number of viewers who would like confirmation. Are brokers and agents allowed in the house with buyers, or do sellers need to be concerned that buyers are going to be in there alone? Can agents and brokers now accompany buyers into the home?
Yes, but they have to only under the constraints of the guidelines, and we touched on a few of those. So obviously, face coverings are mandatory. That cannot be waived. Social distancing is mandatory, cannot be waived. Angela touched on gloves. That is also a suggested best practice as well. I would suggest, however, like I said before, probably not a good idea for both sets of agents to accompany a potential buyer into the home because we don't know how that's going to be interpreted as yet. So I would limit it to one agent, presumably the listing agent, to tour the home with the buyer. And these appointments are, I'm sure the other panelists can confirm, they're all scheduled. These showings are by appointments, or most of them are, subject to your traditional open houses, which are also evolving. So it shouldn't be that much of an inconvenience to schedule it and not have too many people. The other thing, another point that the guidelines do make a point of is that they also don't want lines of people waiting for their turn to show a home. So that makes scheduling by the realtors mandatory, pretty much. So the guidelines, while they're certainly not perfect, the intent is clear. The intent is clear. And I mentioned at the beginning that there are 13 pages of guidelines there. There's also a nice summary that's available at the same website. It's only 7 pages, but it does give mandatory requirements and as well as suggested best practices, and it's a little bit easier to wade through if you're curious of seeing those.
Thank you. And then I'd like to ask each of our panelists to say a few last comments for our viewers in terms of just practical advice for buyers and sellers in this very difficult time. Elena, could we start with you?
Sure. It's just, most important to be prepared as a buyer, as, spoken about before, and have all your ducks in a row. You may come across a bidding situation. So the buyer demand is very high right now in in some of the price ranges. And so it is important to be a ready to go buyer. And as a seller, it's important to be prepared as well and have a knowledgeable agent working on your behalf and utilizing all of these virtual techniques. It's really critical that you have an agent that is going to do this and give you the most exposure on a house, because that is how you're going to get the highest and best price for your home.
Thank you, Elena. And Angela, could I ask you as well to make a few last comments?
I would say to both buyers and sellers, use a real estate professional, but more importantly, lean on them. Lean on them for answers. We should know what's going on at all times. Things are changing rapidly, right? So something could be one way today and something different tomorrow. I would lean on my real estate professional as a seller. What's going on? What's the best practices? What are we doing? And listen to what we're saying. Same thing for the buyers. On both sides, there's for sale by owners, buyers try to do it by themselves. But the truth is there's so much going on in the industry right now that I would really just pick a professional, trust your professional, lean on your professional, get the right answers, and everything will be okay.
Thank you, Angela. And Caitlin, a few further thoughts?
Sure. I would say like the same thing as the other ones. We're all in this together. So we are learning every single day what the changes are, how our business is changing, how it's changing for buyers and sellers. So create your team, both buyers and sellers, of professionals around you. And as Angela said, lean on us. We are here. We are going through this the same time that you're going through it. We are learning with baby steps. It's one day at a time. And we'll get through this. We'll get through this like we get through everything else.
Thanks, Caitlin. And Michael, if you could close this out with a few last thoughts.
Sure. I have really two main points. The first is if you're a purchaser and interested in making an offer on a home, I would just be careful what you ask for, because I think everyone on the panel is in agreement that this is a seller's market. There's low inventory out there. So if your offer is contingent on a whole host of things, that might ultimately wind up negotiating yourself out of a transaction. So just be mindful of what you're asking for and how important is it, keeping it in perspective, how many other people are possibly also looking to make an offer on the same property. And then just to echo my other panelists, we are all in this together, and it's an extremely fluid situation. Be patient. Things might not happen as quickly as possible as you would like. You might not get into physically see a home as quickly as you may like. There may be certainly a lot of new documents to be signed, and disclosures and screening questionnaires. So just be patient. We didn't ask for this. We're all trying to get through it safely together.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to all of our panelists very much for offering all of this advice to buyers and sellers during this time. And now I'm going to hand it back to our publisher, Debbie Krennick.
The coronavirus pandemic has definitely changed the way so many industries do business, yours being one of them. So thank you all so very much for sharing your time and your really practical advice with us today. And thank you, Mara, as well. As the reopening process goes on, we know Long Islanders will continue to have questions, and Newsday is committing to helping you all find answers by hosting more of these events. We also encourage you to check out our resources available on newsday.com, where you will find links to all of our past events and our daily video wrap-ups with the most up-to-date information on the reopening of Long Island. A reminder that if you missed any portion of today's program, it will be available on Newsday.com, Newsday's TV platforms, including Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire apps, and wherever you listen to your podcast. Let us know what topics you would like to address in the future. Before you close out of today's program, please take a minute to take our survey. Your responses really do help us shape our next events. From all of us at Newsday, thank you so much for joining, and have a great weekend.